questions at the moment? Comments? Is this making sense as we're describing this? All right, so there's kind of a predictable pattern of how compassion fatigue affects us. So it's a stage theory, and I have a little bit of trouble with stage theories, and I say that because they imply that you go in a linear fashion from stage 1 to stage 5. And with most stage theories, like, has anybody studied human development or child development? Okay, so you know the name Piaget? Okay, so what does Piaget say? I mean, basically, there's volumes. We don't need all that, but in a nutshell, something about Piaget.
I don't remember.
Well, you know the name. Good. You know the name.
Not any specifics, but
okay.
Kubler-Ross is a better example because people think that you go through those steps.
Right. Perfect example.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't go through.
But you don't.
Order.
Right, and actually, so that's a perfect example too. All right, back to Piaget.
I was going to say about the Kubler-Ross, I actually saw a much more realistic one that depicted it as this very jagged kind of valley because you sometimes revisit stages.
Exactly, and that's my point, is that Piaget, now that I brought him in the room, I should say something about him. Piaget had this theory of child's cognitive development, which moves from very concrete to more abstract. And he says, well, you've got to pass through this stage to get to that stage. So his work is about why kids say, well, I'd rather have a nickel than a dime because the nickel's bigger. Remember that? And putting water in different shaped vessels to determine which one has more.
And then that's he's the table trap. Is that the table trap too, where you can't tell?
You can't tell.
That's Piaget.
Yeah. Okay, so, but I think your point about Kubler-Ross's stages of death and dying is maybe better than Piaget because she put out this idea that people go through predictable stages when they're dying or when they're dealing with someone else's death. And more recent research suggests it's a little more little less linear and more cyclical, or more, as you said, the hills and valleys.
It's more event-driven too.
And
because as things change, let's say you start chemotherapy, then you get this hope, and then the hope gets dashed when the first remission comes, and then you go back to that anger.
Right.
And anger turns into bargaining.
Yeah.
It kind of goes.
It kind of circles through.
And sometimes you can, as you're passing through some of these, you think you've hit the bottom, or you hang in the bottom for a long time. And friends can also help you that you may go here and you may say, I'm automatically a victim and haven't passed through everything. So getting some feedback from others is important.
Is really helpful. So I'm saying all of this before we start into the stages because I think they're helpful to talk about clusters of experiences that we have. And I want to caution us to not feel like they're rigid and linear because we may circle back through them. We may, as you say, hang out in one so long we don't even realize where we are. So that's just a preface to this 5-phase theory that helps us understand it. So let's see what it says in Zealot. Okay, so the Zealot phase for caregivers. Committed, involved, available, solving problems, making a difference, willing to go the extra mile, enthusiastic, volunteering without being asked. Okay, this is the Zealot phase where people are very excited about getting involved in whatever mission or project that they are taking on. Okay, so most of us have been in that phase at some point, right? Yeah? Or you started out in the victim phase. All right, so has everybody had some Zealot experience with something that you do that's important? Okay, the irritability phase is the beginning of the erosion of the Zealot phase. And there we see that caregivers or workers in helping professions start cutting corners, avoiding clients, mocking their coworkers or clients, denigrating the people they serve, using inappropriate humor, making mistakes, and distancing themselves from coworkers and friends. I had the opportunity to work in a large mental health center, county mental health center, and it took up several acres for the campus and had every kind of service that you possibly could imagine. And I don't know how many 100 employees, but what I noticed in the employee lounge is that a lot of the folks that had been there a long time were basically nasty talking about their clients. I mean, I thought it was embarrassing how they put down their clients, they made jokes about them, they weren't careful with the chart work. And so now that I know more about this, I can see, well, these are people that are experiencing compassion fatigue because they're just overwhelmed with the demands, and it's starting to take a toll. Okay? Now, this isn't serious, and it's really common. And if anybody's ever been in a hospital, I'm sure many of you have, if you hear the nurses and the staff talking, it's upsetting. Because I've been in there a lot, and those of you who do pastoral calling, you've been in there a lot. Just hearing nurses kind of talking in ways that they think are outside the hearing of patients and chaplains and all, but they can be kind of cruel.
Well, I am a nurse as well. Yeah.
You do everything.
But sometimes you use gallows humor because, you know, it's that thing you either have to laugh about or you have to cry.
Right.
The genesis of the book MASH, which became the movie and the TV show, was about the way that doctors in a very bad situation tried to take their minds off of it through inappropriate humor and pranks and stuff like that.
Right.
But at the heart of it, that was it. It was patching the boys up to go out and get shot at again, and a lot of them had a lot of problems.
Right. So certainly we can talk about all these phases as being ways of coping with the kind of secondary trauma people experience in these environments. And most of the time it's not based in ill will. It's a management strategy. But it's also a little bit of a clue that things are not going as well as maybe we think they are. Okay, the zombie phase. It's looking worse here. In the zombie phase, hopelessness turns to rage. There's kind of this hate toward clients, and that can spread out to other people. Making judgments about others as being incompetent or ignorant, disdain for clients, and a loss of patience, sense of humor, and a time for fun. So we see that people who are in helping professions, if they really begin to slide into compassion fatigue, then they develop more than this kind of irritability and management by humor and that sort of thing into a more serious place of being rageful and kind of lashing out, I guess I would say. Withdrawal is exactly what it says, but it means that you basically get disengaged from the relationships, the work, and I think this might be part of the insular thing you're talking about of, yes, it's important to have boundaries, and at some point becoming so withdrawn that you're not available, that becomes problematic, and that's part of withdrawal. Okay? So victimization is kind of the end of this. Being overwhelmed, consider leaving the profession, may experience physical illness and have perpetual symptoms.
They call in sick a lot.
And they call in sick a lot, yeah. or they take self-proclaimed mental health days.
I did my clinical pastoral education at the VA hospital in Nashville.
Oh,
And
okay.
I had a week at the Alvin York Chronic Care Facility in Murfreesboro.
Wow.
And Alvin York was the great hero of World War I.
Mm-hmm.
It's in pods. And so the closer to the main building you are, the better care you get. And as the pod gets farther away from the building, it gets into a more beautiful part of the property. But this is where a lot of this stuff happens. The chronic mentally ill ward. People wander around there and bounce into walls, and the nurses sit at their desk and just do their thing.
Right, yeah.
The long-term care unit where people are just deteriorating physically in their beds is way out there.
Way out there.
And it's almost metaphorical for the way the healthcare system treats people as they progress towards the end.
Well, and maybe they put the longer term employees out there too. So then you have the patients are deteriorating and the staff is deteriorating out there in the beautiful by and by somewhere.
You can tell how close they are to their pension
By where they work. Well, I think that while these are not necessarily linear, sometimes people, I think, who aren't able to have healthy boundaries go from enthusiasm to victimization pretty quickly because they don't have in place some of the strategies to protect themselves. So, yes.
I might say, as a caregiver, that all of these things at one time or another are part of taking care of someone with dementia or Alzheimer's care.
Absolutely.
At some point, it can be in the same day, it can be in the same week or month. These type of things occur.
Right, and that's why the stage theory doesn't really work. It's nice to say, well, okay, here's some of the symptoms that happen, and to organize it this way. But your experience tells you that you can be in all of these in a day, or an hour maybe.